of December right now, week 15 NFL season. Breaking Bet coming at you live here on this December 11th, Wednesday. My guy, Eric Pauly, joining us as usual. And I'm your host, JohnnyVTV. Eric, I love having you back, man. I hope you had a great Thanksgiving. I hope you're ready to have a great Christmas. I don't know what your plans are, but I do know it's going to involve a few football games on Netflix after the Paul Tyson fight. Not really sure how I feel about that. But nonetheless, we're shaping up here for what is going to be a very good home stretch to the playoffs. And before we get going on the specific games, as usual, as we start every podcast, give me your favorite look for this upcoming week.
So I'm coming up a heater. I swept the board last week. It was awesome. It's been the first time I've done it in a minute. So, I've obviously come on here and say when I have good weeks, bad weeks, but it was nice to cash out last week. The Vikings were my favorite side last week. They got home. My favorite bet for week 15, it's nice to have a full 16-game slate. And going to my numbers, my favorite bet this week is on the Houston Texans. The Miami Dolphins, they're a team that at this point, I think it's very clear their identity under Mike McDaniel. And I mean, not just in how they run their offense, but I'm talking in terms of what to expect from this Dolphins team. Whenever they take a step up in class and play a better football team or a 500 team, they lose. I know those trends, and that's not why I'm betting this game. I know a lot of us has to do with when Tua's going outdoors. That's not the case as they play in the Dome in Houston. But I make this game Houston -4. I think it should be over 3. And the fact that there are 2.5 -120s out there, I'm very intrigued with the Texans. I know that they haven't had the best overall season by any means, but I think that they're certainly a better team overall than Miami. Yes, this offense has woken up, and they can put up 27-plus points a game with Tua's under center. And the conditions are going to be great. They're in the Dome on the turf. But despite how this Houston's offense has been poor, they start this stretch of a bunch of games in a short leash of time. I think they're going to be healthy and ready to go for this initial game. I think it's on the wrong side of 3. I think it should be closer to 3.5. So Houston laying 2.5 is my favorite bet of this week.
Yeah, I'm glad you said something because I was thinking a lot about this game, and particularly for fantasy. Congratulations for those of you that made the playoffs, or especially if you got a bye week. Just real quick, I was 2-7 in one of my leagues. We switched to a keeper league, and I was 2-7. I'm like, all right, bro, 9 toes in the grave. You can trade picks. So I had Breece Hall as a keeper because I drafted him in 23 in the 5th round, and I kept him. And obviously, he was a first-round pick this year in most leagues. And I'm like, okay, I'm done. I'm going to sell Breece. I end up getting a 2nd round and a 6th round. I'm like, okay, fine. I'm going to see who else I can sell. I don't really get any bites on Amon-Ra or Josh Jacobs or any of these other players. So, I'm like, okay. I have a small chance to make the playoffs. What did you know? I rattle off 5 straight wins. My team comes to life. I needed a couple things to happen, a couple other guys to lose. Everything fell my way, so I ended up making the playoffs. And now I've been riding Tua this last month, but Tua has the Texans in Houston. That's a very tough defense. And now I was struggling. Do I start Tua or do I start Brock Purdy against the Rams? And, in thinking about Tua and this Miami matchup, they've been playing a lot better since Tua came back, and he's done his thing. But there's a lot of holes on this Dolphins team still. They struggle mightily with the Jets, and I know it's a divisional matchup, but at home they're on the rope several times. Now they're going to a rested Houston team. This is where Houston has probably looked at themselves and said, we got to win this game. We got to keep Indianapolis at bay, but we're also going to play 10 games or 3 games in a 10-day stretch. Mm-hmm. Houston has a lot of games coming up in the next week and a half, 2 weeks. So they have to win this game. They're at home. They're off a bye. I'm sure C.J. Stroud and company got a much-rested, much-deserved week off that they needed and had extra time to prepare. And I do agree with you. I think this number being inside of the field goal, Eric, is wrong. I think Houston needs to win this game. And if they don't win this game, there's a much bigger problem.
I agree. And it's fair to, wonder if they're like, it's not just to say there clearly is a big problem. Like that's not debatable at this point, but I think that it's over adjusting for Miami. And I think that Houston, like, don't get me wrong, has Houston definitely been downgraded throughout the course of the year? Absolutely. This is a team that was expected to potentially be a Super Bowl caliber type team. Yeah, they're going to be in the playoffs most likely. So, make the dance you have a chance. But I think that they're giving Miami too much credit here, and I'll gladly take the Texans at the 2.5.
Yeah. I don't want to highlight any of like the big games, the big 4:00 games, because I want to get a little bit into further detail with those. So I guess I'll leave you right now with a game that I'm very intrigued on because I'm figuring out how to bet it because we're drawing shades of what happened last week with Philadelphia and Carolina. Both of us loved Philadelphia. Not only lay the spread, lay an alternate, team total, Saquon Barkley go nuts. All of this to happen. And I know we had discussed how Carolina was doing so well against the spread, how they played the Chiefs, how they played the Bucks, and a team that's now covered, I think, their last 5 games, which is impressive. But we expected Philadelphia to thrash them because of the talent disparity. But as usual, Philadelphia has played down to their competition this year. So what I'm getting at is, even though we're in a similar situation this week, do the Baltimore Ravens, Eric, off a bye at a bigger spread at 16.5 at the Giants, who's now starting Tommy DeVito, do you think they get caught in that Eagles, foot off the gas trap? You think the Ravens coast in this one, or does Tommy DeVito have a chance to cover? 16.5 points is a lot. You're saying the Ravens have to win by 3 possessions to get this done, but they're coming off of a bye week. This is a team that lost before the bye, so they've had 2 weeks to get angry and get prepared. And while the Giants aren't a team that is likely going to give them a threat because Carolina's played a lot better football and is a lot more frisky, I don't know if 16.5 they get home. But I'll say this. I would probably lay the 16.5. I know it's a ton of points. But I mean, Lamar, Henry, Zay, Mark Andrews, I think the defense will have a much better showing. I would lay this number here. I mean, I know how it went last week, but it's apples and oranges. So I think the Ravens, who are making this final push to try and win the division, try and finish as a top 4 seed, and maybe even sneak inside the top 2 seed, can get this done. What do you think?
Yeah, it's just really tough to envision the Giants scoring. Like the Saints defense has been good this year, despite having good is relative, of course. They've been like good enough. We would expect them to be much worse considering the injuries they've gone through, the general lack of solid personnel. You'd expect them to be much worse than they've actually performed. Success rate on an EPA level. The Ravens defense obviously not the same. They've been poor, especially against the pass. But like we're talking about Tommy DeVito, right? Like, yeah, he had those moments last year where he, won a couple of games, and the Ravens, of course, have had their history the last couple of years under Harbaugh and Lamar, where they do play down to their competition. So this is a game that I genuinely have no interest in, Johnny. Even having the Giants now as my worst team in the NFL, I still struggle to get to 16.5. So it's just not something where I'm going to see like value on either way. So I would stay away. Like we've seen the Ravens botch. We know that their defense isn't good. And whenever you have a bad defense, that's never a good sign. But we've also seen what this defense can do against like a Bo Nix we saw earlier in the year. Like he's obviously a lot better than DeVito, but I guess in the terms of like a limited passer, a rookie, they're going to throw the kitchens, not a rookie, but like a inexperienced guy, like not a true arm talent or talent whatsoever. Like they're going to throw the kitchen sink at him defensively. So I could see why you want to bet the Ravens. I had the Giants last week. I ended up pulling trigger on Giants was 4.5. Negative, still the winner. And this is like a completely different team. That this is such a big challenge. I wouldn't put my money on the Giants this week, and I struggle to get there numbers wise. So I would just really lay off here and maybe look at some Giants like team total unders or something, even though it's probably low as hell in the first place.
It's probably like 3.5.
Yeah, I could find that out very shortly. But
I would say one of the best games of the week and one of the most meaningful games is going to be the Thursday night game tomorrow. Rams at the 49ers, field goal game. San Francisco had a lead earlier in the season in LA. They choked it away. The Rams did something they very rarely have done in the Sean McVay era, and that's beat the Kyle Shanahan-led San Francisco 49ers. But now, something I had talked about last week, I think the both of us thought that the Buffalo Bills were going to go into LA and win. And that was going to pretty much, for all intents and purposes, kind of put the Rams out of the ability to win the division. But now with them pulling out the unthinkable and Arizona not being able to win a big game, that's completely flipped. Now the Cardinals are really on the ropes to try and get this division, where it's almost to a point where I don't know if they can do it. And now you have the Rams that are right there. But let's not sleep on San Francisco either. San Francisco is in a tougher position, but they have a lot of divisional games over this last month. Eric, I think San Francisco gets this done here, -3. Let's give credit. The Rams offense, Big Daddy Stafford, Puka, Kyron, Kupp, fantastic. Probably their best game on offense all season. Everything clicked for them. The defense is still concerned. And while I don't think San Francisco is anywhere near as good as they've been, I still think they're capable. They have enough playmakers. Garendo's probably going to be out, but Patrick Taylor could step up. Kittle, Debo. I don't think this is going to be as high of a game, obviously, as the Buffalo game that reached into the 90s, I think, with points. But, I could see somewhere in the 45 to 48 territory. But I like the Niners here, man. Keep their division hopes alive, and 3 points is pretty good.
Yeah, obviously there are some 2.5s out there. So if you want to bet the Niners, actually there's limited 2.5s. So if you can find a 2.5, obviously, bet that, get under that key number of 3. Definitely don't buy a point. I'm saying if you get it at -120 at the worst, take a look at that. But I show value with the Rams. I've obviously significantly downgraded the Niners. I think it's an interesting situation. Obviously, it happens often, but there's no real recency bias on either team in the sense that both teams are coming off very epic wins. So it's not you're seeing that situation where it's this team needs a fraud check and this team's getting too much credit. Both teams are coming off crazy epic wins. So not one team is getting shaded for that little bit of bias that we know are in lines every week. I don't have a massive opinion on this. Last week, I loved the Packers. Luckily, to get that home with 3.5. This week, I really don't have anything that I love for this Thursday. I can see the arguments for both sides. The Niners last week, thought they did. The players wouldn't think that they're dead because they weren't dead mathematically. They come out, smoke the Bears. The Rams in a must-win game as well, beat a top 3 team in the National Football League. It's obviously impressive. We've also seen both these teams suck at times, and divisional games get wonky. So, gun to head, I would say I'd feel better off taking the relatively even team getting the field goal, but this is not something that's going to be making my card from a side or total perspective.
It's funny. If the Niners win this game and the Cardinals beat the Patriots, there's going to be 3 7-7 teams. And then obviously, going into Sunday night's game with Seattle pending. Seattle currently has got a nice little lead on the division. They're 8-5. And, obviously a lot can change because, like we said, there's a ton of NFC West interdivision matchups that can really determine the fate of this division.
For sure.
Okay, I don't know if I have any opinion on this. The only thing I would like to see is what's going on with Derek Carr. The Saints are 7.5-point dogs at home with a low total of 43.5. The reason why the spread is so big, presumably, is the status of Derek Carr. He left last week's game early. Obviously, Taysom Hill's out for the year with a torn ACL. Even if Carr plays, and I know it's hard to do this, but I would probably lay the 7.5 with Washington. I'm not 100% sure if this is the number with Carr out. I would probably think it is. This is probably leaning towards Carr out because, if Carr's playing, I still don't think Washington's 7.5 points better. I think they're probably 3.5, 4.5 points better. But if any case, I would lay it with Washington if I was playing a side in this game.
Yeah, Washington, easy teaser for me. Even if I hope I'm almost positive Derek Carr's not playing. If he does play and this gets down to, like you said, 3.5, I'm hammering Washington. The Saints, like I mentioned, they've been punching above their weight class. They are not a good football team, and if they have Spencer Rattler or whoever their other backup is, that I forgot his name, but we've seen him in a little bit of action. He's not good. No, Taysom Hill adds a terrible dynamic to this team. Marshawn Lattimore is making his first start for the Commanders, obviously placing his old team. If you want to continue the narrative street, JD5 obviously won a Heisman for LSU last year, going to play in front of the Louisiana crowd again. Commanders are off their bye, of course. They're coming off that spanking of not a great Titans team, of course. At least the Saints, you can say, from their perspective, their interim head coach is a special teams guy. They do those special teams things correctly. But you look at these games for the Saints, they had those two massive wins to start, lose close to the Eagles and the Falcons. You think they're good. Chiefs beat them. Buccaneers beat them again. Then they beat a crappy Falcons team. They blow out a poorly coached Browns team at home. Do play a Rams team pretty tightly, and then they're playing the Giants, and that Rams game was also off a bye, so they had their absolute best effort there. So they're not this terribly unprepared team. But Washington, again, at the beginning of the season, they were quite literally one of the best offenses we've seen. Yeah, regression was inevitable, especially considering JD5's injury. Now they're healthy, they're back, and their defense is going to get better with having a legitimate cornerback in Marshawn Lattimore against Spencer Rattler or whoever their other backup quarterback is. If they just key in on Alvin Kamara, which they can do, I expect a rejuvenated Washington team. If I had to, I'd lay the 7.5, but I'm just going to tease that shit down and find a partner for it. Love the Commanders this week.
A lot of good teaser legs this week, and we'll be going through them as we continue to talk about the rest of this slate. Again, no bye weeks. Praise if you're a fantasy owner. This is the first time since probably week 4 we haven't had a bye. Very good. Cincinnati Bengals laying 4.5 at the Titans. I mean, I'll let you start with this one.
I fully believe in betting numbers, not teams. I'm not betting on Will Levis. I don't care. I only make the game 3. I've obviously downgraded Cincy. They should have lost to Dallas. Yeah, you can argue that Dallas is decent at this point. Obviously, they beat the Washington. They dominated the Giants. They barely lose to the Bengals. I don't care what my numbers say. That just means I'm not laying with the Bengals. I see value on the Titans. I'm not betting on the Tennessee Titans.
Yeah. Listen, I think it's obvious who the Cincinnati Bengals are. They've been the same team all year. Jamar Chase is getting the CeeDee Lamb treatment from last year, just getting peppered nonstop. Even when the Bengals are running the ball well, no, we're just going to throw it. A lot of Dallas didn't even bother to try and cover Jamar Chase. They just try to devise absolutely no game plans to stopping or even slowing him down. And I get it. Listen, if you have Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow clicking the way they are, looking like old school Carson Palmer, Chad Johnson connections, completely get it. But even though they can score 40 any game, their defense is still not good, and that is a problem. But if you're looking at Cincinnati here, right, 5-8, if they run the table and go 9-8, Eric, I still think obviously they need a lot of help to get in, but it's possible. At Tennessee, home to Cleveland, home to Denver, at Pittsburgh. 4 winnable games. 9-8 is something that I can see happen for our dear Cincinnati Bengals that we've been dying to try and get into the playoffs. But I will say this. It is scary trying to lay point spreads with them because of how bad their defense is. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, I do agree with you that Will Levis, it's hard to bet on him. I think Tony Pollard can have a good game. Rico Dowdle cut right through that Bengals defense on Monday night. The short week, which we've talked about, concerns me a bit, but I think they'll find a way to get past that. So I would lay this here with Cincinnati.
Understandable.
All right, I was actually looking this up for a minute. So Cincinnati 5-8, 7 teams get into the playoffs. Denver is 8-5 this week. Indianapolis is 6-7. Those 2 teams actually play each other. Miami is 6-7. I personally think Miami is going to fizzle out. We both believe they lose at Houston this week. Then they have the 49ers. Then they have Cleveland. Then they have the Jets. So it's reasonable to think Miami's not going to win more than 2 of those games at best. Cleveland's done. So Cincinnati's the last team in the AFC, the 10th seed. It's the only team right now that basically is alive for the playoffs. So 9-8, which means realistically Denver in the 7th seed has to basically lose out. And Cincinnati plays them, they would have the tiebreaker over them. So that's really what they're up against in this last month. And just for a little bit of clarity, Denver can lose out. They can lose to the Colts this week. Then they're at the Chargers next week. Then they're at the Bengals, and they're home to the Chiefs. So that is a tough final 4 stretch for them. All right, Kansas City -4.5 at Cleveland. I guess I'll start here. Interesting enough, I'm probably not going to bet this game. I'm tired of betting Kansas City. I didn't bet them with their spread against the Raiders on Black Friday, rightfully so. But then I'm like, okay, at home, Sunday Night Football, 3.5 points, one of my favorite numbers to bet. They're up 13 points. And what do? They piss away the spread. And they only won because of a doink. What kind of satanic black magic are they doing in Kansas City? The way they didn't cover is disgraceful. It was 13 points. It looked like you were going to cruise to a win. So I apologize for all the people that took that number. Cleveland's got a capable defense. Their defense is very, very capable. And Myles Garrett is capable of having one of those game wrecker type of performances. Jameis Winston is the highest variance king. When he wants to sling the rock, Eric, he can do so. Jerry Jeudy is on a different planet. He's the hottest receiver in football, just out of nowhere. It's mind-boggling. So I'm not going to take the 4.5 with Cleveland or with Cincinnati. KC.
So I make it 5-7-5. So I see clear value with Kansas City, but I'm in the same boat as you where obviously it's just trends and no one's making bets off trends, or if you are, please reevaluate that. But their inability to cover is there's a number of reasons why. It's obviously the Mahomes tax. It's obviously the fact that they have a bad defense at this point. Their offense can stagnate at times, though they're still first in success rate overall. Patrick Mahomes is still absolutely epic, but this offensive line makes his life very difficult. And like you said, Myles Garrett wrecking this game is very possible. And the Browns are much better at home under Stefanski. But at the same time, Cleveland plays such an aggressive style of defense that if they're really triple teaming Garrett as they should be and doing everything they can to not let him wreck the game, Mahomes should have options to beat the Browns down the field. Their Browns struggle when they're when they play such a heavy man style defense, when you're doing misdirections, screens, even just deep balls, they struggle against those things. And the Chiefs are great at those kinds of things. So I, like you, want to stop betting the Chiefs against any spread for obvious reasons. They just don't cover, whether it be 13.5, whether it be fucking 3.5. They don't cover. But I haven't bet it yet, still debating, but I might be suckered into betting the Chiefs again. I agree Jameis can sling it, but that high variance style, I think Spags as a coordinator is going to be able to get some pressure on him as well and continue to make him make bad decisions. And say those decisions that he makes that suck don't turn into turnovers and they score points. Yeah, the Browns can even win this game outright. Don't get me wrong. That's the Jameis Winston experience. But if, the numbers aren't as random, it's more about the mean, some of these terrible throws he's throwing are turning to turnovers. I have no qualms with Mahomes' his offense going against him. So I don't think this might be the week where I actually do back the Chiefs and not get off the train, but probably would be a stay away.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, maybe get some props if something tickles your fancy, a little anytime tutty. All right, Dallas Cowboys against the hottest team in football, the Carolina Panthers. 5-0 ATS in their last 5 games. They've covered some real spreads against Kansas City, against Philadelphia, against Tampa Bay. I got to be honest, dude. I think I got to go with the window. Never thought I'd see the day. Carolina, Bryce Young, favorites. I never thought I'd see the day, like a lot of other people. I think this is a time to start believing in Bryce Young again. I know we had this conversation probably like a few weeks ago where it's like, okay, Bryce Young's starting again, right? What happens if this guy starts playing well and just goes nuclear? I still stand by what I said. I just don't think he can be your starter going forward. I think if you have an opportunity to draft a really good quarterback or even a quarterback in the 2nd or 3rd round, you do so.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, for as long as he's playing well, Bryce Young, let's keep riding the guy. It's different being an ATS darling when you're a favorite as opposed to a dog. But inside a field goal at home, Dallas hasn't really looked that good. I like Carolina here.
There's a Dallas +3 -112 out there at DraftKings, and this is probably my second favorite bet of the week is the Dallas Cowboys. Honestly, I know it's probably comes off as a square as can be. Like, how can the Carolina Panthers be favorites? Dallas, obviously, is going to always attract that public money from just their fan base, but I think 3 is just a little bit ridiculous, and I think Dallas plus 8.5 and a teaser is something I would pair with Washington and not think twice, honestly, as well. 2-unit play for me on Dallas. This 3 is just such an overreaction. Like, I understand the circumstances, but like Dallas, for a team that we both thought was going to be bad this year and not make the playoffs, they're more around what I think. Like, for example, the Jets, right? Like, I still thought maybe they'd make the playoffs. Didn't think they'd win the East or make any serious noise. But then, obviously, now they're one of the worst teams in football. The Cowboys, like, I thought they were going to be bad, but I didn't think they were going to be awful. And they're not awful. They lost to Overshown, which is actually a huge L to their defense. Like, he got hurt with an injury and left and is not going to be back. But the Cowboys are coming off a win against the good Washington team, a demolition of the Giants, and basically should have been beating the Cincinnati Bengals, who we know his defense is bad. Yes, the Panthers defense was able to do well enough against the Eagles, and they made plays, and they got drives going, and they made that game a game and probably almost could have won that game for the get drop. But I think we're overexerting like how good Bryce Young is. I think Dallas is coming off 3 games of showing no quit whatsoever. Yeah, the Panthers are covering, but it's, again, like you said, very different when you cover as an underdog versus cover as a favorite. And I think that getting a full field goal and asking Bryce Young now to cover a point spread where he's laying points over the keyest number in the NFL, I think that's ridiculous. Give me Dallas, and yeah, Dallas teasers to get the 7.5 and 8.5. I find it so hard to see Bryce Young win by margin.
I'm glad you brought up the 3. I'm glad because that kind of changes. If I can get the Dallas 3, then I think I might do so because, like you said, the field goal is a lot. But I think Carolina can win this game. Dallas has played a lot better. I think Rico Dowdle can absolutely rip through it. It's now he's been for the last few weeks established as the RB1 for the Cowboys. He's the workhorse. He's had a really good last 3 weeks. I think against a Carolina team that gets gashed, one of the worst, if not the worst, run defense in football. I mean, I can see that continue for sure. So, like some Rico Dowdle props as well when they come out. But I'm glad you brought up the 3 because that kind of changes it a little bit for me. No way I would lay 3 with Carolina, but I still probably would take 2.5. I'd still probably lay the 2.5. And this isn't something that I feel on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being most confident. I would feel a 10 on. I think this is probably more of like a 5.5, 6 for me. So definitely one that I did want to mention. But Eric, speaking of a 5.5, the Royal Mint, the Battle of Pennsylvania, the Philadelphia Eagles at home, laying a 5.5 spot at Pittsburgh. The Pittsburgh Steelers in the Royal Mint spot. George Pickens' status up in the air, maybe trending towards not playing. I can't fade the Royal Mint here. It's just it's jumping off the screen saying, Johnny V, bet us. Take this 5.5. Make it a 55 unit play. You got to do it. I think Philadelphia can win this game. I think they probably win this game, but I think the Steelers cover. And I would like to mention this game, in addition to the Bills-Lions, which we'll talk about a little bit later. These two games are going to swing the MVP market one way or another.
Absolutely. And, I'm a big Eagles guy, considering my tickets. Yep. Screw the Birds because I'm a Commies fan. But, ticket-wise, big on the Eagles. Hope Saquon Barkley keeps it up because I have him for most rushing yards. Looking good. Digression aside, I think this is what's going to happen, Johnny. I think the Pittsburgh Steelers continue their voodoo magic run because they're a good team at this point, but they're not a great team, and they beat the Eagles outright. And then what I would recommend everybody does is after the Steelers beat the Eagles, depending on what happens with Detroit and Buffalo, but then I would look to get involved in Eagles NFCs after they lose the game. I think that it's obviously very difficult for any team to, win out for an entire season. I think a loss in these final couple of weeks could actually be a good thing for Philly, assuming they do bounce back and not just absolutely crumble like they did last year. AJ Brown's talking smack in the media. He's obviously not happy. You never want to see that for a locker room of a team that's winning football games. But with that being said, Johnny, I think that what we learned about the Eagles is they couldn't obviously put away the Panthers. We know how the Steelers play and that they're going to get that turnover luck. A one-dimensional Eagles team is not going to be able to beat Pittsburgh, I don't think. And I think that the Steelers are probably the right side here. And that being said, though, if the Eagles lose this game, I don't think it's like hit the panic button on Philly. I think it might be an opportunity to even buy Philly.
Yeah, I like that how you mentioned how you positioned. Just because you lose in a situation like this where the Eagles, they don't have the division locked up by any means. They're still going to play Washington. Washington's
2 weeks, yeah,
is on their heels a bit, but they have a little bit of breathing room. This is a good opportunity, as a lot of times it is to buy back in. This is not a detrimental loss if they were to lose. It could definitely give the Lions some much needed breathing room on the number 1 seed, but I think personally this is going to close at 5.5. I think at open it's gonna go wire to wire, 5.5 all week. This is a Pittsburgh line for me, as you said. This is my number. I gave this to the media. I gave this to the world. The Royal Mint, the Road Dog getting 5 or 5.5. This is it. I would be not only shocked but disappointed if the Pittsburgh Steelers don't keep this beautiful tradition alive of covering a 5.5. All right, Indianapolis Colts at Denver. Denver laying 3.5. Both teams off the bye. No real rest advantage here. It's not a crazy travel from Indy to Denver either. So I would say both teams are in a pretty neutral spot. Nobody really has a big advantage one way or another in terms of travel and rest. Eric, Indianapolis and this high variance style of play they have a stud at running back in JT. They have a stud quarterback that can play like an MVP or he can play like Mr. Irrelevant on a week to week. I like Denver here. The favorite laying 3.5 number hasn't been as successful in the last 2 or 3 weeks as it was for the first half of the season, but it's not even about that. What it's about is Denver's defense has played so well this year as a whole, and they have a blossoming star pass rusher, Nick Benito. They can send a lot of pressure on an opposing quarterback. Anthony Richardson can struggle with that. And I don't know if Richardson's going to be able to use his legs as much to help him escape as he would against a softer defense. Josh Downs is the truth. He should be back. Pittman is still a very good possession receiver. Patrick Surtain most likely is gonna tighten up after the game that Jerry Jeudy had against him. I don't know if I can see Indianapolis's offense really scoring that much against this aggressive defense that might be able to solve what they do offensively, especially winning a lot of 1v1s.
No, I see you. I make the game 4, so I'm basically right on market at 3.5. Definitely see value at Denver. If it gets to 4.5, I see it on the Colts, but 4.5, 4 being like kind of like a dead number a little bit, like it's not really like providing massive value. I'm curious because, like you mentioned, like Anthony Richardson is the one of the highest variance, if not the highest variance quarterbacks in football, along with Jameis Winston. Throws a lot of deep balls. They get completed. His numbers look great. He also can't throw a 5-yard out route half the time. What I love to do in fading a team like the Colts is they're predictable. Like they've been running the same defensive scheme with their same defensive coordinator for the last couple of years. They play a soft cover 2 defense. They allow teams to move the football on them like relatively easily. We saw that even with like Drake May and the Patriots. Like that game went over, albeit on the final play to go over, but that had a live total at 50.5 during the game because it's not a hard defense to figure out. Sean Payton and Bo Nix should definitely be able to move the football, up and down the field. That being said, though, as we know with the Broncos, they're not a great overall team nor offense. They're going to be I think they're going to struggle in the red zone. And the flip side, I don't think Anthony Richardson's going to be able to complete crazy amount of plays. Like you said, like this Broncos defense is a very well coached, just overall good unit. So long-winded way of saying I love the under here, especially at 44.5 being that key number at 44. I think it's going to be a game where Bo Nix is going to get it everywhere he wants to the red zone. They're going to see Denver, going for 4th downs, maybe getting stopped or like having to convert, field goals. I don't think they're going to be like scoring these massive big play touchdowns. So I do think that they have relative ease moving the ball between the 20 and the 220s. On the Colts side, Anthony Richardson, yes, he could connect on some deep balls here, but like you said, this Broncos defense is going to be able to get after him. And if he's not, again, similar to like a Jameis or a Russ, they're not connecting on these big-ass moon balls. They're not really producing all that much anyway. And Richardson, of course, really not at all. So I could see this one being a lower scoring game with time, constantly ticking off the clock with the run game for both sides and both teams having success between like the hashes, but not being able to, finalize and put up 6 to 7 every time.
Well, let me remove you from solo layout. Okay, so I completely agree with what you're saying. I think a lower scoring, in the 44s, definitely towards the under. That's actually juiced to -118 compared to the over at -104. I do find it interesting how Denver's money line at 3, despite being only a 3.5-point favorite, is -198. So a lot of money or sharp money's coming in on the Denver money line. So I do agree with what you're saying. I'm also rooting for Denver because I have some Bo Nix action for Offensive Rookie of the Year. Obviously, Jane Daniels is my guy, but there's a couple things I need for Bo Nix. Have a couple futures parlays, so I'm looking for a nice Bo Zempic game to kind of push for that Offensive Rookie of the Year status. But listen, 44.5, I completely agree with you. That looks like it's on its way to 43.5. But if you force me to pick a side, I do like Denver.
I agree.
Indianapolis on the ropes here. This game lose it, especially for Indianapolis. Losing this game to Denver in this playoff race, really a battle for the 7th seed, this would not officially knock them out, but this would really, really hurt their chances. All right, we're into more 4 p.m. window slates. New England at Arizona, 6.5 points. Again, this is the 15th time this year I've said it on this podcast. The Arizona Cardinals are the highest variance team in football. Last week, they really, really disappointed me. I mean, we talked about this as Arizona betting them at plus 180 to win the NFC West if you like them to win outright instead of laying the money line. They have a nice drive, go up 7-0, and then Kyler Murray throws 2 picks. And then from that point on, they're playing catch-up. They can't stop Seattle. Zach Charbonnet, making them look like Charbs in charge, is running through this defense all goddamn day. I can't believe it. Like, I know the both of us like Seattle this year. Both of us thought that they were a playoff team. And they've played a lot better recently. But for Arizona to lose this game after not even scoring a touchdown at Seattle a couple weeks ago is disgraceful. A game where I took Arizona minus 3.5 at Minnesota, or plus 3.5 at Minnesota, a game that they had in hand that they choked away, they lose. They have not played well. Personally, I'm probably staying away from this game. And to be honest, it's every time I zig with the Cardinals, they sag, and vice versa. Off first look, I just don't think Arizona should be worthy of laying 6.5 points right now. If I was going to go with the side here, it'd probably be New England getting 6.5. But I'm probably not touching anything here.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I'm probably not touching anything. I see slight value with the Patriots, but like I'm right on market. I make it 6.25, so like I don't see like clear value. That being said, the Cardinals at least have proven, despite like you said, their variance, like they are one of the better coached teams, and I would definitely argue that like they're better coached than New England. So that definitely plays into a factor when you're playing at home, taking a team, coming into like your home stadium. Patriots are often shooting themselves in the foot with holding calls, not converting, red zone opportunities. Like the Cardinals defense has been like pretty good. I think this total is a little high. Though I think that might be honestly compensating for Arizona, like kind of going off against the Patriots. But I don't think that, like you said, Arizona, like I've had my reservations about Kyler Murray in Arizona for years now, especially going back to like the, independent study clause in his contract. Like shit like that, to me, that seems like so negligible to probably most people. Like clearly isn't. And yes, he has had success in the NFL. Yes, he has had success as an underdog, but that's not the case. He's laying, basically you have to win by 7. Like you said, Johnny, I don't think that this Cardinal team is a team that I'm trusting to win by margin right now. So slight leans there to New England on the under, though more likely than not playing neither.
Yeah, for sure. All right, we got a few more games here. We got Tampa Bay getting 3 at the Chargers. Chargers should have Vlad McConkey back. They played a tough game without him at Kansas City. This is a fun matchup. I really like this one. I think there could be some scoring. I think we could see some really good quarterback play here. I think this is where Tampa Bay starts separating themselves in the NFC South. I was on Tampa to win the NFC South preseason. They were in the they might have been in the past 3-1 territory preseason. I like them to not only cover, but I think they're going to win outright.
I make it 175, so I'd see clear value with Tampa getting the 3. I think you said, I think Ladd is huge because this Chargers offense at times can be like gross, though this Buccaneers defense is not good. So obviously you have Herbert going against some people that put up numbers. I don't have a strong opinion. Again, numbers wise, but like I said, like they're not obviously not like so in love with all these things I do. Like I try to make my numbers, but yeah, I second guess them sometimes. But that being said, if I'm betting on my numbers, I am taking the Bucs with you. And I think it could be an over spot as well, though it's over the key number at 44. So 45.5, they're definitely expecting there to be like a good amount of back and forth here. And I think it's understandably so. I think we have two, like based on the numbers, we have a 3 at home. Like my number is 175. We have 2 very evenly matched teams. So I think this should be a fun game for sure. And not something I'm, pounding the table for either side.
Yeah. I would like Tampa to win. I like Tampa. I think they're fun to watch. Obviously, my former home, that's my spot, man. I like seeing Tampa win. Okay. This is the game that we're waiting for. This is one of the biggest games of the regular season in the NFL. The Detroit Lions at home, giving 2.5 to the Buffalo Bills. So we talked about this, and I've been talking about this for the last couple of weeks. This game, to me, is not only big for so many reasons when it comes to seeding and a potential Super Bowl preview, but the MVP implications here are monumental. So what I'm thinking, if the Bills somehow win this game, I think Jared Goff Josh Allen basically wraps up the MVP, unless maybe Saquon Barkley breaks the rushing record. I think Saquon Barkley is the only way he wins is if he gets the rushing record. I think there are 4 MVP candidates right now, and 4 only. Goff, Allen, Barkley, Lamar. I think Mahomes is done. I think Sam Darnold is cool. I think he, kind of made a case, but I don't think Sam Darnold's ever going to get an MVP. If the Bills win, obviously Josh Allen probably locks this up and flips it most likely. But if the Lions win, now Jared Goff to me becomes even more interesting. I've talked about preseason. I like Goff. I think Goff can get some consideration. This guy, if he has 35 plus passing touchdowns, 75% completion, over 4,000 plus yards, the QB on a 1 seed, a 15-2 or 14-3 team, why shouldn't Jared Goff get some consideration, especially if he beats Buffalo and Josh Allen? So I think that is definitely in the loop here. If the Lions win this game, Goff is so live. But in the same token, I think if the Lions win and the Eagles win, the Ravens are going to steamroll the Giants. Now Lamar's live again. So if those two things happen, Lamar is 14-1 right now on FanDuel for MVP. Honestly, I don't think he's going to win, but I'd rather be safe on this one. I took him at 14-1 the other day because my thinking is if the Bills lose and the Steelers lose and the Ravens win, now the Ravens are not only live for the division, but now they're back in play for the 2 seed. A couple dominoes have to fall their way. And Lamar's got the numbers right now. So 14-1 will probably become like 2-1. It's going to shift dramatically. So I would say grab Lamar this week because if that path happens, the race is completely changed. It's flipped. But I do think, Jared Goff at 17-1 is still a good bet. I still think he's very live. I know he doesn't get as much love as Barkley or Lamar or Allen as a player, but, what he's done this year outside of that 5-pick game has been incredible. And I think people are kind of stuck on that, but he's got the numbers to back it up as well. Now, in terms of the game here, Eric, listen, it was incredible how Josh Allen played up the Rams last week. 6 total touchdowns. It's arguably the best game we've ever seen him play as a pro. I am looking for a good game from him again. But we've seen this Bills defense get exposed when they're running against a good offense. The Lions offense is run very similar to what the Rams have. They might not have the exact same talent, but it's the same kind of system. I think Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery are going to be able to run the ball efficiently. Amon-Ra's going to have a big game, and Jameson Williams being the X factor that he is. I like Detroit here to win and cover at home.
I think it's plain simple. It's a put your nuts on the table bet. You like the Bills, you take the Bills. You like the Lions, take the Lions. This line is correct. I think you could ask an 8-year-old what this line should be, and they'll tell you it should be Lions minus 2.5. Honestly, there's not anyone telling you they have this crazy edge on this game. They're lying to you. If they have true belief in Detroit, they're betting Detroit. That's great. They have true belief in Buffalo. They're betting Buffalo on the money line. I understand that, and that's totally fine and okay. That being said, I don't have a pound the table for side here. This Lions defense, we know, is injured and banged up, and they lack general playmakers with those injuries now, and they can get scored on at will. We watched Buffalo in 4K get scored on at will literally this past Sunday. We know that happens. We know that Buffalo can score 50. We know Detroit can score 50. it's going to be a fun game. I think this over 54.5 is a key number. I think we're seeing it right around there. Definitely would not really advise the 10-point teasing totals, but like if you are 10-point teasing, looking for some fun, even though it's a key number of 44.5, which is like really not a great bet, but if that's what you're into, like teasing this over, I totally can see getting involved in. I think Josh Allen is going to have an amazing game with his legs. We know the Lions are a team also with like consistent coordinators. Like, you know what these coordinators do when they've been in the systems for this long. They play man coverage. They let quarterbacks run. What does Josh Allen do? He's great at running, especially going to be on this turf, perfect conditions. I think we see a lot of Josh Allen doing Josh Allen things. And that's also, like you said, with your whole argument, Johnny, if they, for the MVP case, like it's very possible the Bills win and Josh Allen has a crazy, numbers on the ground again. And then he runs away with this thing and it's over. So like you said, maybe looking to bet the MVP market for even more of a sweat in this game, but long-winded way of saying, yeah, you should have Bills and Lions and your SGPs for yards. Josh Allen rushing, all Josh Allen touchdowns. I'm all for. Lions side, give me Amon-Ra to go off. Give me some Jameson Williams. Like, they're going to be able to move the football. And give me some Jahmyr Gibbs, of course. And this total is probably spot on, though I could see it going over. It's going to be close to this number, which is also just good for SGPs. And this should be a fun hell of a game. And again, if anybody tells you they have a massive edge, they're lying right to your face. You should know that this is a put your nuts on the table. You like a side, you bet a side kind of game.
Yeah, I completely agree. And interesting enough for anybody looking for those touchdown bets, Josh Allen, 4 straight games with a rush touchdown, and he's got 6 rushing touchdowns in those 4 games. We've seen him run a lot more. He had 10 rush attempts last week, 3 against the Niners, but that was a blowout, so that's hard to really count. He had 12 rushes against KC. He had 8 rushes against Indianapolis. So he's been running a lot more, and we can see him have a lot of success, like you said, with his legs. Detroit allows the 7th most rush yards to quarterbacks, so definitely could see that happen. I'm excited for this one. Very excited. This is probably the best game of the year. So hopefully it lives up to the billing. Okay. Sunday Night Football, Green Bay, a small favorite at Seattle. This is an interesting game here. You have 2 teams that I think talent are similar in talent. The fact is, I think this could end up having some playoff implications as well. If Seattle ultimately does not win the division, these 2 teams are going to be jostling for the 5 or the 6 seed. I'll let you start this one. You think Seattle covers this home 2.5, or does Green Bay go into Lumen Field in Seattle and get this one?
So 3s are out there, but you're paying 120, 115. If you pay 115, I like it more with Seattle, of course, for obvious reasons. But numbers-wise, I have value with Seattle, though. That being said, I have so much Seattle future. Like, I cashed their future of over 7.5 wins this past week. That was nice. I have exact wins 9 and 10, so I'm definitely looking for a Seattle W at some point. So there is some bias there for me. I know I mentioned this last week with that Arizona game. Like, the first time they played, I loved Seattle, hammered them, good win. This time, I'm like, listen, I'm honestly just sweating the future. I don't need to get involved. But my gut to my head says it's probably short with Green Bay. I know that Seattle obviously have been playing some very good football, beating some good teams, but have definitely been fortunate in some of their victories with some opponent gaffes. And Geno Smith, of course, is nowhere near perfect. This offensive line gets beat up. This Packers defense is real. Like, we saw them again. They played the Lions. Like, yeah, they still left a lot of points, but the Lions are going to score on anybody. Like, they still hung out in there, and though they played a ton of plays in that game, something to also just keep into consideration. Again, not a pound the table either side for me. I see value with Seattle, so like guns ahead, I would be betting on the Seahawks. But with that being said, given my current portfolio of futures, I'm good with sitting this one out, and I do see paths for either team to get a victory. I will end that with, though, the Packers have that spread offense. They have 5 receivers who are capable of going out seemingly every single play. Obviously, Josh Jacobs as well. They're a wide receiver by committee team, or a pass catcher by committee team, if you want to put it that way. Seattle does have some guys who can line up with some of their top options and make life a little bit difficult for Jordan Love. So worth considering. But Johnny, I hope I'm wondering if you would see this game a little bit differently, but I do think we see another like hell of a football game here.
Yeah, I'm expecting this one to be coming right down to the wire. For me, this is difficult because Green Bay to me, outside of Josh Jacobs, they haven't really looked that good. I want to see what's going on with Jair Alexander. And if you're looking at betting Seattle, I think you wait because 2.5 right now, the 2.5 on Green Bay at FanDuel is trending towards -120, which means the scales are about to tip. That's about to go to 3. I would probably take the home 3 with Seattle. Tough place to play. They're at home. Green Bay had to travel. And you know what? Listen, I agree with you to the fact where the Seahawks have gotten a little bit of fluky, variant stuff go their way. I feel like Green Bay as a team is pretty solid, but they're very one-dimensional right now. I mean, it's all Josh Jacobs. You rely on a big play or two from Christian Watson or Jaden Reed, but it's not sustainable. So if Josh Jacobs has a bad game or he doesn't have the games he's been having these last few weeks, then you're in a tough position. I feel like even if Zach Charbonnet or Kenneth Walker doesn't play for Seattle again, Zach Charbonnet is definitely capable of having a solid effort. DK Metcalf, Jackson Smith and Jigaboo, who's taken off this year, Tyler Lockett. There's weapons on this team, and the defense has played better for Seattle. It's starting to come to life. They've been a late bloomer, this defense has under Mike McDonald, but I got to be honest, man. You look at what they did, 21 points allowed against the Jets at MetLife, only 18 points allowed to the Cardinals last week. Kyler Murray picked off twice. They only allowed 6 points, no touchdowns to the Cardinals the week before. The week before that against the 49ers in the 20-17 win, only 17 points to San Francisco. I mean, really, they had 2 rough games in the past 8 weeks, and it was Rams, they allowed 26-2. Bills, they allowed 31-2. They only allowed 14 points to the Falcons. Like, their defense has played a lot better in the second half. So why can't that continue? It's a one-dimensional team in the Green Bay Packers. And listen, Jordan Love is a very good quarterback. I like Love. I like how they were patient with him. He's shown a lot. But I just don't know if it's going to be enough in this matchup. So give me Seattle. Wait till it gets to the 3, or on some books you can lay the -115. I think Seattle at +9 is a great teaser leg. It's going to be some props as well here.
See, I hear loud and clear. I think both quarterbacks are definitely also like mistake prone, so like that could play into a factor. Yep. And I am entirely with you that Seattle can certainly win this game outright. And quite frankly, I hope they do for my futures.
Got the 3 seed right now. So if they keep winning, this is a big win for them. If they keep winning, they could be a 3 seed hosting a playoff game. And I got news for you. We might see these 2 teams rematch in the playoffs. So make a note of what happens and how this game goes.
Well said.
Okay. Monday Night Football. Very strange. We're back to a doubleheader on Monday Night Football. I don't know. We were doing that early in the season for a few weeks. It was okay, I guess, but the scheduling is odd. But nevertheless, the first game is going to be Chicago at Minnesota. Vikings laying 7.5, 44.5 point total. I got news for you, dude. I would not lay 7.5 for Minnesota. I think they beat an Atlanta team. I told you Atlanta. This is one of the few Royal Mint spots I would voluntarily not take. It didn't even close as a Royal Mint anyway. I think it was a 6.5 point close. But Atlanta's struggling. They're lost. They're completely lost. And I know Chicago is kind of in that boat, but they've had these games where they decide to actually show up and start playing. And Minnesota, to me, they really haven't been playing good football. You're going to be like, well, what are you saying? They won 5 in a row. If you look at their games, they've struggled in every single game. The only game that they really took pedal to the metal was last week against a pathetic Atlanta team with Kirk Cousins, who shouldn't even be a starter right now. In 2 of the touchdowns, one to Addison, one to Jefferson, deep balls, they fell down and the defender fell down in coverage. Like they were stuck looking at the lights. They didn't even know where they were. It was embarrassing. I mean, I'm sure they got ripped on in the film room. Sam Darnold had a great game. Fantastic. But this is a divisional game. I expect this one to be a little bit closer. So I will not be laying 7.5 with Minnesota. If I was inclined to take a side here, it's going to be with Chicago.
I actually see die with Minnesota, and if I had to bet, I'd be taking the Vikings. But I do agree with you that it's not something I'm like very interested in dying to do. Like last week, hammered the Vikings. They were in a teaser. I had the -4.5, 2 units. Like I love their matchup last week. The Bears though, like they're like a sick joke, and they stink when they're on the road, and that's been proven. Now they're going from the 49ers to now playing in Minnesota, which is one of the tougher venues to play in. But you obviously have to consider like the divisional edge. But I think a lot of people liked Chicago last week because of the like interim head coach bump. But it wasn't a traditional one where like, okay, they just upgraded somebody to be their interim head coach. Like they already upgraded Thomas Brown to be their interim OC and then double upgraded him to be their interim OC, like their interim head coach. Like that double bump negates the singular bump. Like, and we saw it as it happened. It was terrible. It was disgusting. And like, I think the Bears like are really just not good. Like I think the number is fair, and I think the Vikings like anything can happen in an NFL football game. Like the spread is indicative of like, yes, this game is happening now, but also like what the spread should be between these two teams based on their ratings, which has a full season's worth of data to it. So I think, is the spread correct, and can the Vikings cover? Absolutely. But am I interested in backing it considering the divisional aspect of this one? And like you've mentioned, which I do agree with, that they have been fortunate. They're not like absolutely steamrolling like good teams, though they have played. There is something to say to win these close games for Stars. And also they have hung in there with good teams. Like one of their only losses is coming to is Detroit, where they barely even lost. Like, yes, then they come and barely beat Mac Jones. So like, which one is it? Jekyll and Hyde type thing. I get it. And passing, but I see why the Vikings are big favorites. I wouldn't be shocked if they, just send the Bears to embarrassment town again.
Say this, though. These two teams played each other a few weeks ago, and it was 30-27. I know the Vikings were up bigger. This in the box score looks a lot closer than it was. Chicago found their way to claw back and tie it up, and they went to overtime, but they still went to overtime. Like, it was a 3-point game. And, yes, this was in Soldier Field in Chicago, different environment than the comfy confines of the indoors at U.S. Bank Stadium in Minnesota. But, granted, still one, I think, in a divisional matchup against a team that does have some variance. It is a big number. But we'll see. Second Monday night game, which I almost actually left off the slate. I had to realize like 2 minutes ago, is Atlanta at Vegas. 44.5-point total. I'm waiting on Michael Penix to get the nod here. I think something's wrong with Kirk Cousins physically. I think he's injured in some capacity because the way he's looked has been night and day from what it was about 5 weeks ago. So I'm waiting on Penix to come in here, but I think Kirk Cousins is still the guy until we hear otherwise. I can't lay a spread with Atlanta. I know Vegas is dealing with some stuff. Aiden O'Connell's down, and it's probably going to be Desmond Ridder. I still can't do it. I think Vegas's defense can disrupt this Atlanta offense. Kirk Cousins, who's a statue in the pocket. Max Crosby can feast on this. This is a game where Crosby can absolutely wreck the game. I am not laying Atlanta with any points right now, even against their former quarterback Desmond Ridder. Revenge game, by the way. So maybe a couple tutties thrown by Ridder here. So I don't really have anything on the side.
Falcons are not a team that's going to shut you down by any means. So no matter who's under center for Las Vegas, I do expect them to have success. They just have to block them up front. Atlanta's been a little bit of like a sack binge where they've, the offensive line's woken up a little bit. They've been doing better job getting after the quarterback, but I don't think that this defensive line is all of a sudden a great defensive line. Like it's not. It's absolutely not. Maybe the total is a little low because I do think the Falcons will be able to score it. I know like Bijan's going to probably be able to run rampant. This Raiders team has like no pride, no heart. But like you said, on a side perspective, there's nothing I want to bet. I have the game at 4.25, so I'm literally right at market with it being 3.5, 4.5, depending where you look for. So, and again, it's not a spot where I don't want to bet on a bad team currently with a bad defense to win by margin. Like the Raiders are still my second lowest rated team in the National Football League. So don't get me wrong, the Raiders stink, and I'm not interested in really backing them. But I think considering, like, again, I mentioned this last week, like all the talk and love about Kirk Cousins, like when it came down to the wire in Washington and in Minnesota, needs to win football games, he loses football games. Now he's injured off the Achilles, clearly playing poor football, does exactly what we said last week, blows it through absolute egg, another goose egg, another terrible game. Like expecting him to just turn it around, I think is foolish. And I think the Raiders are absolutely live to win this game outright.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a gross game, though. I mean, Atlanta, they're in an interesting position because we talked about Tampa finally flipped for the division with the win against the Raiders last week. And, believe it or not, Atlanta's got an easy path. They're at the Raiders this week. Then they're home to the Giants. Then they're at the Commanders, which is their toughest game left. And then they're home to Carolina. I mean, reasonably, you would think they should go 3-1 in that stretch, finish at 9-8, which could be good enough for the division. And meanwhile, Tampa, a little bit tougher for them. They're at the Chargers this week. Then they're at Dallas on Sunday Night Football next week. Then they're home to the Panthers, but then they're home to the Saints. So I think it's a little bit more challenging for Tampa. But, if you're Atlanta and you win this week, there is a shot that the Bucs lose to the Chargers, which would put both of these teams in a tie, which would favor Atlanta because of the two head-to-head wins. So, I mean, this is a big week. Each of these games mean more over this final 4-week stretch because, to tell you the truth, there's only one team that's going to make it playoffs out of the NFC South, and it's whoever wins the division. So, if you're Atlanta, time to wake up, man, and I got news for you. If that means benching Kirk Cousins in favor of Penix, that's what you do.
It would be very Atlanta for them to, like, win this game and then – lose the next important game. So, like, I feel that. Again, I'm not pounding the table for the Raiders. I'm on market with my numbers. Like, so basically staying away. But I promise you, when you have a defense as mediocre to bad as Atlanta's, a quarterback like Kirk Cousins, who is absolutely not a big game quarterback, like, look it up. Every time the teams need to win for positioning, this or that, they botch. He botches, I should say. And an organization that we know has been relatively, I don't want to say, like, they just, like their GM is talking about how they don't need Lamar Jackson, don't want to hire Bill Belichick. Like they're clearly not a good, well-run football organization. Like sometimes it's as simple as fading those teams. Like yes, there are times teams will go on magical runs and win a Super Bowl without having all this continuity. But there's also a reason why some dynasties exist and some teams stay great over the course of new quarterbacks, new coaches, etc., or are hardly even changing coaches because of how the continuity is going. Falcons ain't one of them. The Raiders certainly ain't one of them. Ugly game. Hopefully we see an over for points, and Las Vegas is certainly live to win. All right.
Absolutely. We hope everybody enjoyed a little Wednesday evening back and forth with Eric Pauly and myself on the Week 15 NFL slate. Best of luck this weekend. Thank you for tuning in. Eric, always appreciate your time, my friend.
Appreciate you, brother. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Hopefully we can get back. Had some, this week we think we've been the most in sync so far. Nothing really that you were so adamant about that I loved and vice versa. Definitely some different sides, but nowhere near like the other weeks where we've been like completely like oppa.
I know, right? So we got Wednesday next week. Then it's Christmas in 2 weeks. We're looking at Christmas. So I don't think I'll be ready to do a Christmas show. Maybe that Monday or maybe that Tuesday with a little trio of NFL games. But Eric and I will discuss and we'll provide a little bit more insight on next week's episode of breaking down the Week 16 NFL slate. Catch you next week. Best of luck, everybody. Thank you.